जो कि संघ के प्रचारक हैं और HRDI के फाउंडर मेंबर हैं। यह हमारे फ्रेंड, फिलोसोफर और गाइड भी हैं। अनिल वर्तक जी संघ के विश्व विभाग से जुड़े हैं और देश विदेश में बसे प्रवासी भारतीयों के बारे में अति उत्तम जानकारी रखते हैं। हमने इनसे निवेदन किया था कि हम सब सदस्यगणों, मित्रों व इंटर्न का मार्गदर्शन करें। आपने हमें समय दिया, धन्यवाद। ओवर टू अनिल वर्तक जी।
नमस्कार।
नमस्कार।
आज के कार्यक्रम में उपस्थित सभी मान्यवर, HRDI के पदाधिकारी, अन्य उपस्थित बंधु भगिनी। Today's topic is understanding Indian diaspora, and as I see, the main aim of this topic or presentation is to give a brief outline about Indian diaspora to the interns, probable interns who are joining HRDI for a short internship. As all of us, many of us may know that Indian diaspora is a quite vast topic. It is spread in over 140 countries of the world. We will come to that. So in the limited time which is available to us, we can only have some sketch, some outline about its history, its achievements, and some of the issues concerning this diaspora, which would be useful also to these interns who can take up further these topics for their dissertation or project. राजेश जी, वेदांश जी वो प्रेजेंटेशन
ठीक है सर।
So as we start, the term originally used, diaspora, is used for those who were dispersed from their homeland. That is, they were Jews who were persecuted and dispersed all over the world from their homeland, and from there the term diaspora started. Later on, it had acquired a little broader meaning, and slowly now, in today's context, the people who have migrated from their homeland, from their home country, they are generally described as diaspora. Where we see Chinese diaspora, Nepalese diaspora, Sri Lankan diaspora, Indian diaspora. Many times it has happened because of certain persecution, because of forceful migration, as it happened during the slavery days. And in recent days, it has happened for other reasons like business, trade, education, etc. As far as the migration from Bharat or India is concerned, we can see that there is a historic migration which dates back more than 1500 years or more, when Indians used to make forays in sea in many countries in Southeast Asia, in African countries for trade, and also through the difficult terrains to Central Asia. Also, we know that there is a group of people known by name Romani, Roma, who migrated definitely under some duress about 1200 to 1300 years back. Still, they trace their origin to Bharat. So there can be many such examples of historical migration from India. What we will be focusing on or concentrating will be the migration in recent days, which is generally within last 200 years. Also, when we say diaspora today, two main categories of people can be considered as part of this diaspora, especially when Indian diaspora is concerned. Those who have migrated for many generations, settled in countries abroad, and acquired the citizenship. Many of them have almost lost the connection or touch with Bharat or their ancestors, and they are generally clubbed as persons of Indian origin. Their origin is traced in India, but now they are part and parcel of that country. The other one, those who are migrated recently, maybe for a short term, for business, education, research, and other purposes, who may not have acquired the citizenship of that country. They are still Indian citizens, but staying in many countries on permanent residency or other such structures, who are generally known by the term NRI or non-resident Indians. Together, they generally form what we call as Indian diaspora. The number is roughly about 30 million. It's not a small number. It is spread in over 140 countries. The number of PIOs is considered about 18 million, and number of NRIs is about 13 million. Next. The slide before that. So, when we say that this is the Indian diaspora, it is spread in over 146 countries. Vedanshji, previous slides, you have. Before that. Yeah. One of the major migration that happened during British period is known by the name indentured labor system. When slavery was stopped in 1833, the British in their colonies needed workers to work in sugarcane plantation, sugar factories, to lay the railway lines and many other such jobs. And a large number of Indians, mainly from UP, Bihar, Bhojpuri speaking, and some from Orissa, Bengal, southern parts of Bharat, migrated to far-flung countries like Fiji, Mauritius, Caribbean countries like Trinidad, Guyana, which we normally hear in cricket. And they were settled there. It was in a way a forceful one. In a way they are lured that we will be taking you to some greener pastures, some land when there is a gold. Some such notions were there and people migrated there during that time. They settled there because there was no alternative. But due to their sheer hard work, they prospered there, and now they form the major part in these countries, like Caribbean countries I mentioned, Fiji, Mauritius I mentioned, it is Kenya, it is Malaysia, it is Singapore, and some other countries too. After a certain period, some what we call as white collar jobs also, where people were going there in countries of Eastern Africa for trading, for merchant, for as teachers, as clerks. And this migration mainly happened during British period, and slowly in small numbers, the migration also started to some Western countries where there was a very small opening at that time. Post-independence, the migration happened in Western countries like US, Canada. There was a demand for workers, people in many faculties of work. US for higher education, for medical profession, and so in North American countries, European countries, as well as United Kingdom, many Indians migrated. Also, as we know, there was a migration in good number from East African countries during the 1960-70 decade, when those countries like Kenya and Uganda got independence, and they drove away the Indians there. So many of those Indians also migrated to UK. So this is mainly for higher education, business, trade, and other to Western democratic countries. we can also include Australia, New Zealand in this category. The third major migration started after the exploration and boom of oil in Gulf countries, where they needed workers in large number, some middle-level professionals in large number, and so almost till date, this migration has been continuing in all the Gulf countries, mainly United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. As we all know, 30 or almost 1/3 population of UAE is that of Indian migrants. More than 1/3 population of Bahrain is that of Indian migrants. So this is the scale of migration to Gulf countries. At start, it was mainly from Kerala, but nowadays it is also from other provinces of Bharat, like Andhra Pradesh, like Bihar, and some other provinces also. During last few decades, there is a migration to many other places, and for different kind of reasons, like for professionals who are going to many countries in Europe, in Eastern Europe, in African countries, wherever they are getting business opportunities or job opportunities. A good number of Indians have migrated to Ethiopia as teachers. A large number of students who are there in those countries for at least 4 to 5 years are taking education in many countries. As one example, if we just consider the Indian students who are taking medical education in Central Asian countries or countries in East Europe or Russia, it could well go beyond 50 to 60,000 in numbers. So this is the number. We already hear that the number of students who are going to US, Canada is more than 1 lakh every year. This is the number which is going outside India for education. And so in recent days, this trend has also picked up, and similarly, many other professions and professionals are migrating for short term or for a more longer term period. Next. All these Indians who have settled there for maybe 5 to 6 generations, or who are there for 5 years, 10 years, make what we call as Indian diaspora, and the image of this diaspora all over the world is that Indians are hardworking people, they are industrious people, sincere, peace-loving and peaceful people. Wherever they go, they will contribute for the betterment of the local society. This is, in general, the image of Indians. We all know about the achievements, major achievements of this diaspora, and I may just touch upon a few. In academics, of course, Indians have excelled. We may know many names in US universities, US management schools. The people in IT industry are dominated by people of Indian origin. Similarly, those who are in research field, those who got Nobel Prize like Hargobind Khurana, until recently, all such examples can be given as academic achievements of the diaspora. In business industry also, Indians, wherever they went, they have contributed hugely. They are leading two major software firms, as we all always mention about Microsoft and Google. A recent study in UK mentions that there are over 600 businesses run by people of Indian origin whose turnover is more than 100,000 pounds. And in total, these businesses, their revenue is about 37 billion pounds a year, and they are employing about 1,75,000 people in Britain. So this kind of achievements are there in business and industry. In Kenya, if we go, a majority of the trade business is in the hands of Indian community or persons of Indian origin. These Indians, wherever they went, they have also contributed in public office or in public forums. And we know that two prime ministers in Portugal and Ireland are of Indian origin. There is a vice president of Suriname, the current vice president by name Ashwin Adhin, he is of person of Indian origin. The Trinidadian prime minister some years back was of person of Indian origin, like mayors, like member of parliaments. In many countries, we see the persons of Indian origin occupying these positions. Similarly, the overall cultural influence of Indians, what we call as soft power, is also notable. We can see it in terms of Yoga Day, which is getting more and more prominence these days. We can see it in terms of our popularity of Indian cuisine, Indian music, at times Bollywood in some countries, the soap operas or TV serials, and many other things. In brief, the Indian diaspora, as I said before, is having a very positive impact on the societies wherever it is there. We also know that it has played its own responsibility wherever the situation demanded. So during the freedom struggle, also when there was a call for freedom of India, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose gave the call and formed the Indian National Army. Many Indians in Malaysia, Singapore supported him, joined him. Mahatma Gandhi's struggle and its start in South Africa we are aware of. We also may know the saga of valor of Indian soldiers who went as a part of British Army in First World War to Israel and liberated the port of Haifa, which then paved way for the freedom of Israel. We almost all in Delhi must have visited the Teen Murti Chowk, which is now renamed as Teen Murti Haifa Chowk, in memory of these Indian soldiers who fought the war in Haifa and other places during First World War. Similarly, there are stories of how the Indian soldiers and laborers have literally given their lives when the railway was constructed in Kenya. The railway was constructed from Thailand to Burma, which is described in the movie Bridge on the River Kwai. Thousands of Indians laid their lives for this railway line. So some of the achievements and some of their struggle, I am just trying to mention. Even after independence, we have seen that whenever there was any demand or any need from India, an appeal was made to the diaspora always rose to that occasion. We know about the struggle which was taken against the emergency during 1975 in Western countries, and the voice for the restoration of democracy was also raised there. During the Kargil war, before the Kargil war, the sanctions after this Pokhran were imposed on India. The Indian government in 1998 and then later on also asked for investments in terms of that resurgent India bond, and NRIs mainly on other people hugely responded to it, always fulfilling or overfilling that target. So this is some of the achievements and glory of Indian diaspora for which all we Indians also have to be proud of. But as sometimes the notion that everyone who goes abroad is in a better position, he goes for some greener pastures, and whosoever goes to Videsh must be in a very good shape, must be leading a very good life, must be living a very good life. That may not be the case always. Next. There are definitely issues which also plague them. At times, these are the individual issues. At many places, we may have heard that they are subjected to what they call as hate crime, what they call as racial profiling. During these days of this Black Lives Matter, many of the Indian students living in Western democracies, countries like USA and UK, have also told their experiences during their school days, how they are subjected to such kind of treatment because of their origin, because of their skin, and some such things. Also, at many places, they are subjected to violence. Many times, businessmen are kidnapped for ransom. Recently, some African countries are in focus for that. Countries like Mozambique, countries like Kenya, countries like Ethiopia, where the sincere businessmen are also subjected to such kind of violence and abduction, kidnapping, etc. But as I said, we can also discuss little more on the issues where the groups of people or Indians, mainly Hindus, are subjected to different kind of discriminations, atrocities, and within next few minutes, I would like to describe such cases in some of the countries which would be useful probably for the interns also to take up some subjects for their study. We all know Malaysia, where the Indians number about 7%. Many of them are Tamil speaking Indians. When Malaysia got independence and after that, they pursued a policy which is called as Malay First Policy. Later on, it also came to be known as Bhumiputra. The word actually is Sanskrit and we can all understand the meaning of it. But the actual practice, what happens is the Malays are given preference in various dimensions of social life, like jobs, like education, like land owning, like business. So most of these Tamils who have worked for generations in rubber plantations, they are not very much educated, not in a very good economic condition. They are continuing to remain poor because of lack of opportunities. The people in Malaysia say that these Tamils or Hindus cannot get admission to higher education even though they are academically strong. At times, if they get admission to some courses, the choice of the course or desirable course is not given to them. Whenever someone has to start a business, some 30% of the partnership has to have a Malay partner. So this kind of discrimination always is there for these people. There is another section in Malaysia which is a sizable section, 25% Chinese. But Chinese being traditional in business, they don't suffer much. But these Tamil people who are suffering this are continuing in their condition of poverty. Because of poverty, some vices are there in these. They turn towards vandalism. They turn towards many kind of atrocities, and these atrocities always continue to drive them to the poverty and other such penuries. About 10 years back, many of the temples which were constructed on probably the tea estate lands with proper permissions during many years, they were raised down under the pretext that they are not legally permitted. So such kind of religious persecution also is quite prominently happening in Malaysia. Many times the cases come when there is a Hindu person married to some other religious person or a person with some other religion. Whenever he dies, he passes away, his cremation cannot take place by Hindu rituals or Hindu way. Even the courts, I mean, our people say that there is no legal or constitutional remedy also to their grievances. So Malaysia is one example where this large section of people are subjected to this kind of constitutional and legal discrimination. In Myanmar, relatively, Myanmar is more peaceful, I would say, but still one can see that the people from Myanmar who remained there after the military coup some 70 years back, they are not till now, many of them are citizens of Myanmar. They were not given the citizenship, no documents. Last 10 to 12 years back, under the military junta, they gave certain kind of citizenship to these people, what was called as naturalized citizenship. And so their next generations probably will become the full citizen. But as of today, the data shows that in Myanmar, half of the population is still having, or what they call as documentless. They do not have any documents. So at every point in social life, they have to face harassment. They are not in the mainstream of educational field, in government jobs, in many other jobs. As we see in many of these countries, Indians generally do not have having a proportionate or sizable representation in police, in other military kind of services, in upper government services or judiciary, because of lack of education, because of lack of such opportunities. In Myanmar, I would also like to point out about one section, because these days the tales of Rohingya were given widespread publicity in many of the media in Bharat, also worldwide. But there is a section of about 15,000 people who reside in the same Rakhine state. The names of the cities are Sitwe and other 2-3 cities, who are by religion Hindu. By faith, they are Hindus. So they are in a way caught between the two, the Rakhine state military or the administration and the majority Muslims there. And because of such conditions, they also had to flee towards Bangladesh. Bangladesh also did not support them. So today their condition is, those who are in Bangladesh, they are neither getting any help from Bangladesh because of probably their faith. The Indian government also is not extending much help to them. They are not able to go back in Myanmar where they are originally from. And those who are in Myanmar, in these areas of Rakhine, also their main occupations are some lowly jobs, because no education, no representation in any kind of the system I had said. So this, though one may say a small section, but what we call as Rakhine Hindus, which are part of this Rakhine province, are also subjected to these kind of atrocities and difficulties. In Gulf countries, all we know that it gave the oil boom. The oil boom gave what we call as money order economy, what they call as the many states, and the state of Kerala runs on remittances. But those who actually go there had to undergo various kinds of difficulties, working in difficult terrain, working in very, very harsh environment under very harsh kind of laws and practices. It starts from the point when they start from Bharat going towards these countries. As many of them who go for these menial jobs, or what we call as blue collar jobs, those who are not much educated, they don't know about the documentation, they don't know about the actual job condition which they are facing after they go there. After they reach the destination, their passports are generally kept within the company, so they are in a way caged birds. They cannot utilize their passport whenever they wish. These people are also subjected to housing, which is called at times as labor camps, and the conditions at these labor camps in the harsh heat of the Gulf terrain is also very bad, as many of us we may have seen. Similarly, the maids or the women who go there, they are employed in individual houses, and the difficulties, the atrocities to such women are generally go underreported or non-reported. They also, out of fear and out of the money which they see, out of the money they have to repay to their parents for whatever loans and other conditions of their households, these atrocities are mainly go unreported, but these maids and the women folk are also subjected to various kind of atrocities. Of late, the government and government of Bharat has also undertaken various measures like ECR, as we know, immigration clearance required, some minimum payment kind of arrangements were done, some kind of a digital treasury or digital safe for the documents was also made. There is a fund with the Indian Embassy which is called as Indian Community Welfare Fund. Some such measures have been taken, but as they say that the outside people, when they know that Gulf means something gold, Dubai means some very glitzy thing, once they go there, many of them have to face various kind of harsh situations and difficulties. About Sri Lanka also, we know that some years back there was a civil war for various reasons. I am not going into that. But after that civil war, there are about 90,000 war widows for whom yet any kind of substantial relief is yet to come. There is also a section in Sri Lanka which is known as Indian Tamils, those who went there to work in tea plantations about 200 years back. These Indian Tamils stand out differently because they are not part of the Tamil population who is there for many generations or centuries. Once Bharat and Sri Lanka got independence, these Tamils were supposed to come back to India. Sri Lanka in a way first was not ready to accept them. Then with a treaty with Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, many of them were given the citizenship of India, citizenship of Sri Lanka. So today there is no citizen who does not have a citizenship. But because of such a history, these what they call as hill country Tamils, up country Tamils, or Tamils who work in tea plantations, they are deprived of various basic things like they stay in tea estates. So wherever they stay, the land belongs to the tea estate. They don't have a documentation about their housing, about their land. There are no good or proper education facilities. There are no good or proper health facilities. Recently, we may have seen that the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, he had inaugurated a health facility which was donated in a way by Indian government for these people. So these upcountry Tamils face an issue of underdevelopment in this area of Sri Lanka, and their number is also about 2 to 2.5 lakhs. Similarly, I would also like to mention about two countries, though one may say that they may not be part of diaspora as such because they were in a way part of Bharat. Because of partition, they were separated from India or Bharat. These are Pakistan and Bangladesh. We know about them. So just to mention, the population of Hindus in Pakistan and Bangladesh has reduced from 1947 till date in a very major proportion. In Pakistan, it is almost now about 1/8. Before or during time of partition, it was about 13 to 16%. Now it is less than 2%. In Bangladesh, or that time it was called as East Pakistan, it was about 30%. Now it is considered as 8, 9 or maximum 10%. Many of them have migrated. Many of them had to undergo religious conversion, and because of this, their penury and their atrocities are continuing till date, till after 70 years. In Pakistan, we continuously hear the stories about abduction of young girls, their forceful conversion. After conversion, when they are subjected or presented in a court, they have to give some statements under duress, and no action is taken on the perpetrators of this crime. Their land at times is confiscated, their land is looted. Many times, the educated Indians or educated Hindus there in Karachi, like doctors, have also been kidnapped and murdered. There is a law of blasphemy in Pakistan, which if someone is subjected at, has to have undergo a harsh punishment under the Sharia law. We all have heard about the case of Wrinkle Kumari since it got a worldwide publicity, but there are so many wrinkle Kumaris in Pakistan which are daily undergoing such kind of treatment, and many of them have to undertake some way or the other the painful journey, at times the difficult and dangerous journey to Bharat, and they try to cross over to Bharat. Fortunately, for all such people from Pakistan and Bangladesh, the recent amendment to Citizenship Act has given a hope that they at least will get the citizenship in Bharat so that they can live, or their future generations can live little peacefully. Bangladesh also, though the number of Hindus is quite big, it is about 1.1 to 1.2 crore. The representation, there is some representation in the central ministry, there is some representation in judiciary, but still, mainly in the rural area, the continuous atrocities and harassment of Hindu population goes on unabated. Whenever there is some festival like Diwali or Durga Puja, we hear that the murtis have been vandalized, any decoration or also festivals have been destroyed, and their lands, their women folk is subjected to such kind of atrocities. Honor is always violated, and they are also forcefully given, so that they have to again think of choosing to migrate towards India. Afghanistan also, we know that Afghanistan, the number of Hindus and Sikhs have dwindled considerably. There is hardly any number. The last number in a survey of number of Hindus in Afghanistan given was less than 50, where previously it was, the total number was about 1 lakh. And there is a section, because those who have migrated to Bharat, at least they have given some hope, as I said, because of the Citizenship Act. But those who migrated to some other countries like Germany are facing again the difficulty, and there is a section of Afghan Hindus in Germany who are now having difficulty. Neither they can go back to Afghanistan, nor they are getting the citizenship of Germany. So this is a sizable population which also has to be considered for their problems. As I say, the Indian diaspora in many countries faces different kind of issues. They are not necessarily always violence or such kind of discrimination, but still one has to consider these issues and try to find some solution or other for them. One major issue, as we may have seen, is that of women or girls who marry to NRIs or the citizens of those countries who are Indian. Once they go there, and if there is any failure, any discord in the marriage, these girls are subjected to very, very uncertain and difficult situation, because the local laws does not support them. The person there cannot be probably tried in Bharat. So he just abandons these girls, and there is a large number of such girls or women who are abandoned by their husbands, and still because of such attraction of foreign land, many of the girls are subjected to this kind of situation. So some measures were taken recently by the ministry also, so that there will be some clamp to these kind of atrocities, and those recalcitrant husbands will have faced certain action in Bharat. But still, this problem of NRI marriages has to have some attention of those who are concerned. Secondly, some Indians in business, I am just pointing out some issues out of many. When they work in mainly the Western countries, they have to give certain money, certain amount for social security deposit. Such social security deposit can be redeemed or taken back if they attain citizenship there, stay there. If they don't stay there, when they leave that country, they cannot take their legitimate amount, the amount which they have given for their social security, back. Such kind of problem is there in many countries, and that's why our government also is asking for what they call as totalization agreement with US. Similar problem is there in Japan. As I said, I have tried to touch upon some issues about the Indian diaspora, because the time almost I have overshooted by about 5 minutes. In a nutshell, as I said, the saga of Indian diaspora, if we consider since its historic times, is also a very inspiring one. The saga of our people who went there during British period and after that also inspires not only us, but it should be inspiring to all in the world because of their dexterity, because of their hard work, their achievement in those countries, with the motto that they will serve their own country as well as they will continue to maintain their cultural thread, cultural attachment with Bharat. But still, many of our brethren continue to undergo very harsh treatment, atrocities, and it will be the duty of Indian people as well as the government to study these issues, address these issues, whichever forum it is possible, so that all such brethren of ours can also live peacefully and their generations also will live happily. I think I have tried to touch upon some of the aspects about Indian diaspora which would be helpful for, as I said, the interns to pick up some subjects. The only last point which I have to make is all these people can be called as our cultural ambassadors. They are taking the Indian culture outside. So it will be our duty to strengthen these cultural ambassadors so that India stands as tall country throughout the world in whichever times comes in future. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, Vartak ji. आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. As Vartak ji has just told that HRDI is having an internship program, and at this juncture, there are about 25 interns who are working with HRDI and focusing and working on different diaspora issues. So today's program is, Vartak ji has rightly said, was for the benefit of the members of supporters of HRDI and for our interns. So I will request any of the interns who are working for HRDI on diaspora or other issues, if they have some query or if they have some question, so they are given the first priority to ask. Please, any of the interns, they can raise their hand or just start. Okay, Arnav, you are there. Arnav, you on your video and unmute your mic and ask the question.
Thank you, sir, for providing me such an opportunity. Sir, in regards to what Manthak ji said, sir, in those regards, I had a question. Sir, I had two questions in those regards. So primarily, India has been a land which has been invaded by numerous invaders throughout the course of history. And sir, it is not it is very difficult nowadays to define actually who Indian is, considering the fact that our original people are being displaced and murdered and slaughtered by numerous invaders over the course of history. So, sir, are we in a situation to define Indian diaspora by all the cultures, or is it just the Hindu culture that we have that should define us? So, my second question is, sir, isn't this betraying the trust of our people who are living outside the nation, that there is a government, there is a nation that has 70% Hindu majority, and yet they are just backstabbing their people who are living outside by not providing them the opportunity to raise arms or raise their voices against the people, against their oppressors, or at least if not do that, provide them an opportunity to come back to their homelands.
Okay, I will take the second question first. As you said, yes, it is the responsibility of the Bharatiya government and also the Bharatiya society to strengthen the people outside. But as our society and our government, since time immemorial, is believing in democratic kind of principles, we believe in peace. So our effort always will be to try to find the solutions for them while they remain in these countries, and also try to live a dignified way. You mentioned something about the armed struggle, which we have not supported ever. That's why our endeavor always will be to raise such questions, to strengthen ourselves, the position of Indian society such that we can prevail upon those governments, we can prevail upon those societies to give a opportunity for dignified life towards all the minorities there. Generally, in our practice, we are considering, we are thinking about the entire humanity and not only a part of it. As our cultural brethren, we are thinking about these people also, but in our heart, we will try to establish such kind of atmosphere of harmony throughout the world. And when India becomes such a powerful country that it can prevail upon the entire humanity to work in such fashion. The first question I did not really get because of invaders and as you said, but as I said, to define an Indian diaspora is little difficult because India is a term or name which was given by others. We did not really have any kind of boundaries since time immemorial. But as of today, if we consider the part of Bharat or India as its political boundary, then as I said, one part definitely will be those who have migrated from India, but also those who were part of this India. Whether to call them as diaspora because of that notion of migration will be difficult, but definitely they are also culturally related to us, and that's why they are the subject of our concern and we need to work for them.
A very, very, very loaded question and very well answered. Anyway, any more questions? You may raise your hand. It's a free session. We are giving first priority to our interns. Then we will come to all other participants. So, if any intern is asking any question or have something to say about this session, they may raise their hand or say it in the chat box. And if it is not there, then we may request the members and supporters. Okay, Push Sharma, you want to ask something? Please switch on your mic and also your video. Push Sharma.
Hello,
Push,
good
are you
evening.
there?
Yes, sir.
Please push.
Yeah,
So
good evening.
First you tell the gathering as to on which subject in Indian diaspora you are working nowadays.
Actually, my topic for HRDI is not on Indian diaspora. I'm currently working on right to women.
Right to?
Right to women.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Then you ask the question about this session.
Yeah, I was just asking that as sir have just right now told that we are culturally connected to the people facing atrocities, which we call Indian diaspora. So it becomes our inherited duty to help them out. So how can we right now contribute in helping them, and can they also be brought to India like the people were brought by CA? Can they also be part of our country inside our boundary?
Your last sentence was not really audible. If you can type, it would be good. As I guess from your question that how we can help the people who are facing atrocities. As I say, when we are staying in India, we can have certain forums where we can raise these issues, mainly the international forums. Also, the government of India, generally, when they talk in terms of bilateral or any other platforms, they can raise these issues. And many times we have observed that such kind of efforts yield some results. There is some shift in the policies of the government of those countries also, and the actual implementation that has happened. So what is necessary is continuous awareness about these issues, their representation in various formats, and the display of the public will of Indian society, which will also reflect in the policies of Indian government that we stand by our brethren in these countries, and whatever happens to them, we will be also a stakeholder, direct or indirect, in their welfare. And as our position gets strong, definitely it will have an effect, maybe an indirect effect through the governments of those countries in the conditions of these people. This has been observed by experience also.
Okay, fine.
Sir,
Any
may
other-
I?
Pushp Sharma. Okay. Pushp, you have been answered, I think, by Anil Vartak ji. And
there
now
is
who's
one-
there? Who's there?
Sir, Antika, may I ask a question?
Antika, yes. Okay, fine. So you are interning with HRDI, and on which subject you are working?
So currently I'm working on the Kuwait expat quota bill, so the Indian expat community in
I
Kuwait.
wanted someone to raise that point also and discuss with Anil Vartak ji. Please.
Yes,
Continue.
sir. So, sir, I wanted to ask that since the Kuwait expat quota bill is being discussed right now in the Parliament, National Assembly of Kuwait, and experts say that by October this should be enacted into a law. So, considering that 8 lakh Indian expats would be sent back to India if this is enacted into a law, how do you think would India deal with this problem of unemployment of about 8 lakh people coming back? And also the problem of remittances that would then again not come, and the dependents would also suffer.
Yes. Since the Kuwait bill has passed first step, we will have to wait till its final culmination. I believe there will be some kind of developments in between, because as many of the people who have some experience in working in those countries say that it is not very easy for those countries also to implement such laws in total. So yes, in all, there will be an effect of such legislations, the effect on economy of oil-rich countries and the consequent effect on the Gulf workers and on India through remittances. So this effect, the general consideration is that it will take some time to fully realize that, and definitely we will have to chalk out certain strategies like having some skill matching kind of things, where the people who are coming back, though have some skills, how their skills can be utilized. Also, as the economy picks up, and I am hoping that maybe in 2-3 years overall, not only India, these people may also find some opportunities not only in India but in other parts of the world, which happened during 2007 and 8 kind of thing, where some people from Gulf, when they did lose their jobs, they went to countries in Africa and other countries. So still, my take is that the picture is not very clear. The numbers like 8 lakh and all are little dreary, but the picture is yet to emerge, and definitely some impact, as the impact of COVID, we will have to take up. There is
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, there is a question
Any other intern?
has written that can such people be also granted citizenship like the people in CAA, and what would be its effect? As you know, the CAA is mainly meant to, in a way, give the citizenship to those who were considered as an agreement in many agreements and discussions during these two countries, mainly Bharat and Pakistan, because Bangladesh did not came into picture at that time, mainly the Nehru-Liaquat Ali Pact, where the minorities in those particular respective countries were supposed to give given full protection. And this law is to give citizenship to those religiously persecuted people. So for other people, there, as it is said, that there is definitely a law, or there is definitely a provision for citizenship, but citizenship is always not something, it's not like a transplantation of a tree where it can be uprooted from one place and again rooted in some other place. So some different kind of strategies will have to be developed, but the ultimate thing will be the person has to remain at a place where he is there for generations, and there itself he has to have a guarantee of security, welfare, and dignified life. That is the concern which we will have to address ultimately.
Okay. Any other intern? If you have something to ask, please raise your hand or. Okay. Aniket, please, you ask. Aniket
Yeah.
first.
So my question is both to Tarun Vijay sir and Anil Vartak sir. I have heard Tarun Vijay sir before also. So slightly going off topic. So the recent conversation that which we are having with Nepal as of now. So what is your take on that? And do you think that now India should have a proper border policy with Nepal and stop the free movement of people from both the factions? Or should this be only be taken up as a diplomatic matter, or should some military presence should also be there? Not as in a war situation, but as a strong message to the other side.
Tarunji saying something?
Uh, uh, it's up to you, Vartakji, because this program is just focused on understanding Indian diaspora. I don't know, I will leave it to Vartakji and take a call.
Yeah, I'll just whether Tarunji is saying something. I was just waiting.
Tarunji? Tarun Vijayji, can you hear me?
Hi, Namaskar. I can hear you, but I didn't say anything. And I think on Nepal, we should follow the principle of a diplomatic silence now. It's a very sensitive issue. Whatever we say can be construed in a different way. But one thing is sure that the present situation is a temporary phase. And it's a manufactured situation. It's not a natural expression of the Nepalese people. It shows a very cosmetic, a very artificially manufactured situation, which has many factors, alien and domestic. I trust that many of our people from government and from non-government are working constantly to save the situation and recreate an atmosphere of amity. Whatever has happened is very unfortunate, and in Uttarakhand we have been facing this kind of a problem since long. But suddenly it has come up, and it looks that perhaps we are not properly prepared to face this kind of atmosphere. But Anil Vartakji has a better authority to speak on it, and will follow his line. Nepal should not be discussed in this way because many of us are quite known in Nepal, and whatever we say can be taken in a different way. So we wish Nepal all the best, and we think that the Nepalese soul and the Nepalese spirit will overwhelm the present situation very soon, and again the situation will come back to normalcy. Whatever is happening is very, very unfortunate and unthinkable, was unthinkable a few years back. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarunji. Baltejji, I will come to you, but let me first take some more interns if they have some queries. Any of the interns, if you want to ask, kindly just confine yourself to the subject, that is the Indian diaspora. Don't go to other subjects, please. Any other interns, or we come to Baltej Singh Mansab, who's the member of the Minority Commission. Any other intern?
There is a question in chat box.
There is a question in the chat box. Okay, fine. I'm just going to the chat box, and so there is all those questions have been answered, Vedanshi.
Okay.
There is one which asks that whether that regarding Corona.
Yes. Is I think I missed some. I think I missed some question. Informative. No. Okay, fine.
The resumption of flights.
Yes, Anil ji, please continue. Vartak ji, please continue.
What I see is the resumption of flights will have more probability of coronavirus spreading. Now, as we see today, it is very difficult to say anything with certainty. Still, the science, the medical field is also, doing some kind of trial and learning from it. So, as they say, one will have to keep a balance between the economic and general activity, as well as to save ourselves from spreading such thing. So whatever decisions ultimately some authority will have to take, and they will take a considered balanced decision. That I believe. It is very difficult to give any specific answer whether this will aid it or this won't have any effect of it. But any authority ultimately will have to take a considered and balanced decision within the given time frame.
Baltej Singh Maan. Sir, please, sir.
There is nothing left after the excellent presentation by Vartak ji. मुझे 12, 13 और 13-14 में मैं 2 साल के लिए फुल ब्राइट फेलोशिप और जो रोटरी इंटरनेशनल के स्कॉलरशिप पे 2 साल के लिए मैं अमेरिका गया था, सैन होजे स्टेट यूनिवर्सिटी में। तब हमारा यहाँ पे हिंदू स्वयंसेवक संघ के साथ मेरा नाता जुड़ा रहा, तो मैं कुछ ये जो डायस्पोरा कम्युनिटीज़ के जो कुछ चैलेंजेस हैं, कुछ अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ हैं, वो मैं प्रैक्टिकली आपसे शेयर करना चाहता हूँ इंटर्न्स के साथ। एक तो रिमिटेंसेस की जो बात की, इससे पहले एक बात कर लें कि जो रेलिवेंस है डायस्पोरा की, जितनी अब कोविड और पोस्ट कोविड में है, इतनी कभी भी नहीं रही होगी। आत्मनिर्भर भारत के लिए डायस्पोरा इतना जरूरी है, हमारी इकोनॉमिक एंगेजमेंट के लिए, हमारी पॉलिटिकल एंगेजमेंट के लिए, इंटरनेशनल लेवल पे हमारा इमेज बनाने के लिए, हमारे सोशल नेटवर्क्स क्रिएट करने के लिए, हमारी रिमिटेंसेस बढ़ाने के लिए, ट्रांसफर ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी के लिए हम डायस्पोरा की तरफ हम कंसंट्रेट करना चाहते हैं। सरकार को भी इस बारे में ख्याल है और इसका मुझे लगता है कि ये रेलिवेंस को एक तरह से डायस्पोरा को हमें इसको आगे रखना होगा। दूसरी बात, जो गोगना जी को बहुत बहुत बधाई कि इन्होंने एक माइनॉरिटी का प्रोजेक्ट भी लिया है, लेकिन ये सारी डायस्पोरा कम्युनिटीज सारी माइनॉरिटीज हैं, पाकिस्तान में भी, अफगानिस्तान में भी, अमेरिका में भी, कनाडा में भी। तो ये डायस्पोरा माइनॉरिटी कम्युनिटीज के लिए वहाँ जो अधिकार हैं, उनको डाइवर्सिटी, उनको इंक्लूसिव अप्रोच में लाने के लिए उनको जो कुछ भी दिए गए हैं, उसमें एक सबसे बड़ी वार्तक जी को भी मैंने तब वहाँ से अमेरिका से लिखा था कि अब हमारी हिंदी लैंग्वेज और पंजाबी लैंग्वेज जहाँ जहाँ यूनिवर्सिटीज़ में हमारे बच्चे पढ़ना चाहते हैं, वहाँ पर ये कानून बन रहे हैं। अभी कैलिफोर्निया में और ये एक और स्टेट में कि पंजाबी स्पीकिंग और पंजाबी रीडिंग बच्चे इतने आ गए हैं, तो वहाँ पे पंजाबी के क्रेडिट्स उन्होंने शुरू कर दिए हैं। हर एक यूनिवर्सिटी में ये क्रेडिट शुरू हो गए हैं। सो जो डायस्पोरा के चिल्ड्रन भी हैं, उनको उनकी भाषा में, नेटिव भाषा में, मातृभाषा में उनके लिए क्रेडिट्स मिल रहे हैं। इसका भी मैं आपके साथ शेयर करना चाहता था। और एक डायस्पोरा के जो चैलेंजेस कुछ इन्होंने थोड़ा सा संकेत किया है, मैं आपको बता दूं कि जैसे पंजाब और केरल में डायरेक्ट कोरिलेशन हो गया, जो रिमिटेंसेस आई उससे अल्कोहल कंजम्पशन ऑफ अल्कोहल बढ़ गई, केरला में भी बढ़ी, पंजाब में भी बढ़ी। तो इसके हमारे सोशल जो डीमेरिट्स थी इसकी, रिमिटेंसेस की, उसको भी स्टडी करने के लिए मैं गोगना जी इन इंटर्न जो इंटर्न्स हैं इनकी मैं हेल्प करूंगा, डाटा प्रोवाइड करेंगे इनके बारे में। और दूसरा जो उनकी मिस्टेकन आइडेंटिटी है उसके चैलेंजेस के लिए, कई बार उनके मिस्टेकन आइडेंटिटी में, जैसे पंजाब में प्रॉब्लम आई, तामिल डायस्पोरा की प्रॉब्लम आई, मिस्टेकन आइडेंटिटी में वो कई बार नेशनल सिक्योरिटी के लिए चैलेंजेस भी बन जाते हैं, जैसे पंजाब में हम फेस कर रहे हैं। तो ये मेरी कुछ ऑब्जर्वेशंस थी जो मैं आपके सम्मुख लाना चाहता था। धन्यवाद।
शुक्रिया मान साहब। अभी तो सबसे पहले हमने आपके साथ इंटर्न जो माइनॉरिटी लैंग्वेजेस के लिए खासतौर पर एक कर रहे हैं, और तो हम उस पर जरूर आपका भी एक टॉक अरेंज करना चाहते हैं, और बाकी भी साथियों से भी मैं कहना हूँ कि ये इस HRDA संवाद में वी हैव जस्ट इनिशिएटेड दिस प्रोसेस, and in this HRDA संवाद we will be taking up all human rights issues with which HRDA is concerned. So if you have some topic in your mind and if you can lead that talk, kindly let us know, because it is going to be a continuous process. I'm sorry Vartak ji is to attend another meeting. Otherwise this session is going quite interesting. So I thank all of you for joining us, and to Anil Vartak ji, I cannot say thanks because he's part of our organization. So thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much.